Hey everybody. So today and this month we are focusing our attention on physical activity. So physical activity is something we all need regardless of how old we are. So we're really kind of thinking about physical activity at all ages. So that's where we want to kind of focus our conversation today and this month and really think about ways that we can be active and some of the things that come with that, barriers and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. And we'll get going on the benefits of activity and all of the things that come with this. So just give me one moment here. All right. So, hoping you are all seeing this. So again, physical activity at all ages. And this is something that, again, we really want to emphasize that everybody, regardless of how old you are, um, how active you've been up to this point, any of that, that physical activity is critical and you can do it regardless of all of those things. Okay, so why physical activity? Why do we do this? Regular physical activity is one of the most important things we can do to improve our health. It is the one of the single most important things we can do. So I can't overstate that enough. That physical activity is so important and it's got so many benefits. Moving more, sitting less, regardless of how old you are, your sex, your race, your ethnicity, anything, or your current fitness level. Movement of any kind is essential. So it is really, really important that we move around and that we don't sit as much, especially if we have a job where we're sedentary a lot of the day. We really have to be diligent about moving around. Frail health that often comes with aging, a lot of it, in large part, is due to just the lack of physical activity, either as we've gotten older or maybe we were somewhat active when we were younger and we've let that slide, or we've just never been real active, whatever the case. But a lot of times it is due to physical inactivity. The good news is it's never, ever, ever too late to benefit from becoming physically active. So we can start regardless of how old we are and kind of what our current level of fitness is. It's never too late to get that benefit. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So remembering that some activity is better than none, right? Like it's anytime we get any sort of activity, we're going to get some benefits. However, the benefits really start to measure up and we really start getting more bang for our buck when we can get some regular, consistent kind of a routine type of activity. So you can see here that the recommended amount of physical activity per week does vary by age, right? I mean, it's just from when we're children up to the time that we're an older adult, that physical activity requirement does change. So you can see that the preschool age children, age 3 to 5, the main thing is with kids is that they get physical activity every day throughout the day. Okay. They're just at an age where they need to get activity as well, and we should try to make that fun, whether it's out playing games, riding bikes, trikes, whatever it is, playing on the playground, doing whatever. We're teaching our children at a young age that it is important to be physically active, but we can also have fun with it, especially when we're kids. So we want to try to focus on that and really sort of making sure that our kids at that young age are really reaping the benefits of being physically active, and they're also carrying forward that habit as they get older, as far as continuing to be physically active as they get older. Okay. Our children and young adolescents, ages 6 to 17, really about an hour or more to moderate to vigorous intensity activity every day. So again, you don't have to do that all at once. They don't have to go out and do something all at once, but if they can get a half an hour here and a half an hour there or 15 minutes here and there, however you want to break that up, but that's really the recommended amount for kids that age. And we'll talk about these little age groups here a little bit more in some detail as to why that's important. But as parents, that's something we just really, really want to be thinking about for our children, is making sure that they are provided opportunities to be physically active. Again, if you've got a kiddo or somebody that's involved in some sort of a sport, usually that's not a problem. They usually can get that hour. But if they're not, that's something we really want to make sure that we're diligent about making sure our children have the opportunity to go out and get some good activity. Okay. As adults, ages 18 to 64, we need at least 150 minutes of a moderate intensity activity. And we'll talk about a little bit more about intensity and some of that as we get further into the presentation, but at least 150 minutes over the course of 7 days. You can go over that, of course, but just breaking that up, however it works in our 7 day and our week period, however that works for us, we really need to try to find that. Older adults, 65 years and older, really the same thing, finding 150 minutes per week of that moderate intensity activity. So that's something we'll talk about a little bit more in a few slides as far as what does that look like. Okay, so as we talk about health benefits of physical activity, again, this is back going to our younger age bracket into our children, and we can see why is this important even when they're young, even when we have kiddos as young as ages 3 to 5 years old or whatever. Why is this important? Well, you can see here, these are the benefits for kids. It improves their attention and memory. It really helps them stay focused. Can reduce that risk of depression, build strong muscles and endurance. It can improve blood pressure and just their overall aerobic cardiovascular fitness. It can reduce the risk of developing chronic disease, even as children or even to later into life, as far as type 2 diabetes, obesity, things like that. It helps strengthen their bones and it helps regulate a healthy body weight and reduce body fat. So there's a lot of different reasons why, even as young kids, it's important to develop these healthy activities or healthy habits around physical activity for a whole lot of reasons that's listed here. So it's good that, we as parents, if we do have kiddos, that we really, like I said, we really try to make time and set aside time and make that a kind of a top priority for our kids. Okay, then we get into the adults. We can see here that, again, we have, as adults, we have some immediate and then we have some long-term benefits. So the immediate benefits is it can improve our sleep quality. Sometimes when I'm coaching with someone or I'm talking with somebody and they're not sleeping real well, sometimes it kind of boils down to, well, I'm not doing a lot of physical activity too. So sometimes that's something we can try right away to say, okay, try to get some of that regular activity in and see how that it does affect your sleep quality. It can reduce those feelings of anxiety or blood pressure. So a lot of times, especially if we're in the middle of a work day, or we're in the middle of a stressful situation, or we're feeling overwhelmed, getting outside or just going out and walking somewhere, even if it's inside, can just help reduce those feelings of anxiety or feeling stressed or overwhelmed, and it can have an immediate somewhat improvement of our blood pressure. So sometimes just taking that time to have those immediate sort of benefits is great. If you look at the long-term benefits, this stuff is really kind of cool too, as far as reducing the risk of developing dementia, depression. It lowers the risks of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, 8 different types of cancer. Obviously, it helps reduce the risk of weight gain. It improves our bone health and it reduces the risk of falls through just increased coordination and balance and all of those things that bring that physical activity brings us. So there's so many reasons why physical activity is good, again, not just for our physical health, but also for our mental health. So lots of things to consider is, why is this a good idea? Why should I make this a big priority? And why do I need to kind of move this to the top of my list when it comes to my day-to-day or my weekly activities? Okay, and this is the same thing as we get to adults 65 and older. Really, a lot of those same benefits as we were just talking about for the older adult. Just again, those positive things that it can help improve, and obviously the lowers the risks of the things we just talked about, like heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, weight gain, all of those things. So it is really important that we make time for that regular physical activity. Again, we can all do activity here and there and sporadic things, which is good. We're still reaping the benefits of that. Um, not to knock that a little bit, but the more consistent we can be, the more regular we can be, the more we reap these benefits. So regular physical activity is really sort of the key thing. Okay. So we talked a little bit about intensity here in a couple of those previous slides. Well, what does that mean, right? So aerobic or cardio activity, sometimes you'll hear it as aerobic activity, sometimes you'll just hear it as cardio. Um, that's any sort of activity. It's going to get your heart rate up. Okay. It's going to benefit your heart by getting that heart pumping. It's going to get the blood flowing. It's going to improve your cardiorespiratory fitness. And there's a couple of different intensity levels at which we can do that. When we talk about having it done at a moderate intensity, that just means your heart's going to beat faster than it normally does if you're just sitting. If you're just sitting at your desk or you're sitting doing something, kind of what we call your resting heart rate. A moderate intensity is going to elevate that heart rate above your resting heart rate. You're going to breathe a little harder than normal. You're going to notice that heart beating a little faster, but you're still going to be able to carry on a conversation with somebody. So if you are out doing an activity with a friend or a family member, you're still able to talk with that person. You can see some examples of some moderate intensity aerobic activities. And this really is, this type of intensity measurement really goes across all age groups. So even if you're a younger kid, an older adult, the way we measure intensity really is the same thing. You know, if you're a kid and you're just maybe doing some some walking or some slow bike, or, your heart's up a little bit, but you're not working real tough. These are kind of the same things across all of our age groups. So you can see some brisk walking, water aerobics, dancing, gardening, tennis, biking slower than a 10-mile-an-hour rate. So you're just out kind of pedaling along a little bit at an easier rate. Those would be ideas or examples of kind of that moderate intensity activity. This is the type of activity where we say at a moderate level, you should be getting 150 minutes of this kind of activity throughout the course of your week. Now, this list isn't all inclusive. There are many other ways to do this, especially, when we get into spring and summer, we get a lot of folks that are out doing more yard work. They're mowing, they're raking, they're doing those kinds of things. Those things would also be examples of, okay, I'm doing that. It's getting my heart rate up a little bit. So those examples would also count. So this certainly isn't an all-inclusive list. There are many other ways we can do moderate intensity activity. So however that works into your day, think about the things that you do, things about the things that you need to do. And you can kind of judge for yourself, how many minutes do I get? Okay. When we look at more of a vigorous intensity, this is going to be a step up. This is going to push your body a little further. This is going to require a higher amount of effort. You're going to get warm. You're probably going to break a good sweat. You're not going to be able to carry on much of a conversation with someone because you're more out of breath. That heart's working a little harder. So these high intensity or vigorous intensity activities you can see there, hiking uphill, maybe with a heavy backpack, you're running, you're swimming laps, you're vigorously aerobic dancing, heavy yard work. Again, that would be more you're digging or you're hoeing, more of a vigorous tennis, just, maybe more by yourself, in a singles versus a double match, cycling faster, jumping rope, anything like that. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list. But these types of activities, when you talk about a higher intensity, we don't need quite as much of that. As a matter of fact, we only need 75 minutes of this type of activity every week, just because you are working a lot harder. So this is obviously not something that we need to get to this level on activity. But if we're somebody who is able to get to this level and we like those activities, just be aware that, hey, we're shooting for 75 minutes at a minimum per week with this particular kind of activity. So as I was just talking, you can do moderate or vigorous, you can do a mix of the two. As I just pointed out in that previous slide, 1 minute of vigorous intensity activity is about the same as 2. So as I said, you can do 75 minutes if you're somebody that likes to do the high intensity, or you can do 150 of that moderate intensity activity. The thing to remember that when we think about that type of fitness level, everybody's going to be different. And sometimes it just means, based off our age, our current fitness level, do we have any sort of chronic condition or disability? Anything that's going to maybe alter that. So what may feel like a moderate level to somebody might be at high intensity to somebody else. So the examples that were given on the previous slides, again, don't necessarily always have to fit into those categories. It might differ for you or for the person you're walking with or for the person that you're doing any kind of activity with. Um, it may feel a little different depending on what's your current level of fitness, what's your age, all of that kind of thing. So it depends on you, right? What are you comfortable doing as well? And then, so, you just have to be keeping that in mind too, is just because it showed up on those lists of examples of moderate activity or intense, more vigorous activity, those things can change up a little bit depending on each individual person. So that's something else you kind of want to keep in mind. The important thing to remember is that you do the physical activity that's right for you and your abilities. So if you want to walk at a real brisk pace, great. But if you're somebody that likes to walk, but you need to go at a slower level, that's fine. It's just, the important thing is to get out and move and make sure you're doing the right activity for your ability. Okay. The other thing that's really important when we talk about activity, and this is again kind of true across all of the age groups, more so adults specifically. Adults need to do strength, they need to strengthen muscles and do some strength or resistance training a couple of days a week. Do some muscle strengthening activities. And I always tell people you can do it up to the point where it's hard to do another repetition without help. Well, what's a repetition? What does that mean? How do I do this? So a repetition is one complete movement of an activity, like lifting a weight or doing a sit-up. So one sit-up is one repetition or one rep. So you want to do 8 to 10 repetitions per activity, and then you count that as a set. So just trying to think about, okay, I want to add in a little bit of this kind of that cardio, and sometimes you hear it as strength training, sometimes you hear it as resistance training. But the mix of both of those, especially as we get to adults, and then especially as we get to an older adult, this becomes really important for a lot of reasons. It helps with our joints, it helps with our balance and coordination. A lot of the things that we think about that can cause us some problems as we get older, it's important to remember that, hey, we can work on some of this stuff now. A lot of times too, I'm talking with people who have a lot of maybe low back discomfort, right? So we deal with low back discomfort. A lot of times too, as we get older, that becomes more prominent. Well, if we start working on some of our abdominal muscles and we start strengthening on our abdominal muscles, some of that low back pain can go away. So just doing some general work with our abdominal, or you'll hear it as your core, just trying to do some few things like some sit-ups or doing some things like that, or some crunches that can kind of keep that core strong. Any of those kinds of things. Sometimes you can just do some arm curls or some squats and some lunges, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit here in another slide. But knowing that the combination of that cardio or that aerobic type of activity that gets your heart rate up, plus some strength training or resistance training, really is going to be just maximizing the benefit. And it doesn't have to be hard. Sometimes people think of weights and they think of it being, ugh, I've never done that. That's really hard. It's kind of scary or overwhelming. It doesn't have to be. It can be something really simple. So just be thinking about ways that, hey, I can do a couple of days a week. I can five or 10 minutes to do this, because the benefits are so huge, you guys. So really finding the time to just work that in, as far as your strength training is really important. Okay. Again, strength training, or again, sometimes you'll hear it as resistance training. You choose an activity that can work all of your major muscle groups of your body, your legs, your hips, your back, your chest, abdomen, shoulders, arm, all of it. Find things that you can kind of hit all of those areas, and really try to do that. You can lift weights or work with resistance bands. So sometimes you have those stretchy bands at home. You can do things that way. You don't need to have that stuff. If you're somebody that doesn't have hand weights or resistance bands, you can do exercises that use your body for weight, such as push-ups, sit-ups, squats, lunges, anything like that where you're just using your own body weight. Again, depending on where we're at as far as our age and our physical fitness level and things, we want to make sure we're doing these things as appropriate, and we're not trying to go beyond where we're currently at as far as our fitness level. So we want to be mindful of pushing ourselves, but being aware of, do I have some limitations? Do I have some chronic conditions? Things I need to be aware of. A lot of times this time of year too, we have folks that are digging in the garden. They're doing some digging, they're doing that hoeing, they're doing a lot of very physical work that really works that upper body. Yoga, some yoga postures are really good at doing some core work or working on some of our legs, and some of that kind of stuff. So yoga postures can be extremely good as far as some strength training. So again, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to think about going to the gym and lifting and all of those kinds of things when we talk about strength training. It can be something that's pretty easily done right in your own home. And you can kind of find a number of different ways to do that. I like to make sure I tell people that, again, if you're somebody who hasn't done this before, if you have any sort of a chronic condition or disability or any sort of medical concerns about what you should or shouldn't be doing, make sure you consult your doctor first. It goes for our aerobic or cardio training and workouts or activities along with our strength training. We want to make sure that we consider all of the possibilities and things that when we start these types, if we haven't done them before, at least not consistently, and we know we have some chronic conditions, just talk to your doctor. Make sure you're doing things right, so that you're not going to hurt yourself or exacerbate any of these things that you might have already present. So, when it comes to physical activities, this is a very real thing. And when I am talking with folks and doing some health coaching, this is not to say that I, am poo-pooing barriers. There's a lot of reasons why barriers can come up. The one thing I always encourage people, and again, this kind of goes across the ages. This can go down to kids, this can go up to the older adult. These types of barriers exist to some level, to a high level, to a smaller degree, whatever the case is. But there are barriers that I run into when I'm talking to people. Now, again, sometimes we have legitimate barriers. We do. We sometimes have legitimate barriers. Life happens, things happen where we have legitimate barriers that pop up. This is the question I always want to pose to people when we're thinking through our activity levels. Are the barriers that are in place, are they truly a barrier? Is it an excuse? Is it valid? Is it sort of self-created? These are things I just want people to think about and sort of self-assess when we're talking about physical activity. We always think about we can put stuff off until the end of time. I mean, really, we can. So I always want people to just sort of kind of inwardly assess what truly is keeping me from being able to go out and be physically active. What is holding me back, or what has held me back, or what has derailed maybe what has derailed me when I have been working out or getting that activity in, and trying to think of all of the things here that could and do come up. Lack of time is obviously one of the ones that I hear most frequently. I just have a busy week. I didn't have time. This came up, that came up. And many times, yes, we are very busy people. We do have things come up. Again, sometimes things that are coming up unexpectedly. I was like, this life happens. So sometimes that lack of time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Lack of social support. We'll talk about that a little bit. What does that look like? What does that mean? Lack of energy, lack of motivation, kind of tied together, but really two different things, but a lot of similarities there. Fear of injury, lack of skill, high cost and lack of facilities or equipment, and then of course the weather. And that, living where we do here in the Midwest, obviously can be a legitimate thing. And so we'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. So we need to learn to overcome barriers and challenges that come about, and how do we work with them? How do we overcome them? Okay. All right. So lack of time. Obviously, this is one, again, that I hear all the time. So I always tell people, think about your activities for just a week. Look at your activities over the course of a week. Some of what I would call your negotiable and non-negotiable activities. Non-negotiable things like you have to go to work, you have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to drive to work, you have certain things that you have to get done during your day. Non-negotiable. If you look at your activities for the week, could you identify 5 30-minute time slots? Could you identify 3 or 4? You know, how might you find that time? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a third. This is one example. It may not have to be one 30-minute time slot. You might have 15 minutes here. Maybe you have 20 minutes there. Maybe you have 45 minutes here. It doesn't, I'm using 30 minutes here as an example, but looking at your week, where might you find that time? Okay, so that's one thing you really need to do. Sometimes to start off with, you can do that retrospectively. Just go for the week and look and see where you might have some opportunities. The next step is looking ahead and finding those opportunities, planning that ahead of time. Okay. Adding physical activity to your daily routine. This is something that, you don't have to necessarily set aside a block of time. This is just making sure that you add this in. Again, you always hear about, walk to work, ride your bike, park in the farthest away spot, take the stairs, walk your dog. All of the things that you can do, maybe instead of emailing or calling a coworker, if you can get up and actually go walk and talk to somebody. Just anytime you can add in any sort of physical activity, just by virtue of what you do every day, that's good. Again, choosing activities such as walking, jogging, stair climbing, whatever that you can do based on the time you have available. So again, if you want to go out and walk, you can walk for however long. If you've got 10 minutes, great. You can walk for 10 minutes. If you've got 45 minutes, you can walk for 45 minutes. So you can do activities based on what you have. So sometimes even if you only have a few minutes available to you, and we call that exercise snacking, which is a term I really love. You work that in during the day. It's just when you have a few minutes, can I go out and walk on my break? I've got 10 minutes, can I get up and stand and stretch and do some things right at my desk, which we call deskercising. Can we work in some deskercising? It's kind of a fun term, but it's just finding those time, even when you got a few minutes, just to do some things, even if it's just stretching, sometimes that's helpful. Using physical activity facilities and health and wellness programs at work, if you have those available to you. Take advantage of those if those things are there, because it does help us maybe kind of crunch that time in there and whatever. So use that if it's available. Hold walking meetings, conference calls, so you're somewhat multitasking, although we shouldn't multitask a whole lot, but if you can stand or walk or do that during a call, great. Stretch, move around, anything of those types of things that you can do during a conference call or a phone call or even a meeting. Okay. Find ways to work it into your day so that that way that takes that lack of time sort of goes away. If we find that and we're really dedicated and diligent about finding that time and we want to make it happen, okay, we can do that. Okay. Lack of social support. Okay, this is one where, again, sometimes I hear this, and this is one too where, especially if we're talking about our kids, our teens, our younger adolescents, this is something that as a family, even if we have a spouse or friends, or we want to be supportive, and if it's our own interest, we want to also express that to our friends and family. We want to explain our interest in physical activity. We want them to support us and cheer us on. Invite them to join you. Get in there as a family, especially if you have young children or adolescent. It's a great example. You can all go out as a family. Everybody can support one another, and you can go out and invite each other to go along. You plan some social activities around physical activity. So maybe you go out hiking, maybe it's a bike ride, maybe it's just whatever it is, but those social activities that you can do with other people and be active at the same time. Sometimes you can develop those new friendships with physically active people. I've talked to people who join the gym, for example, and they meet people, and they form these new friendships with people who have a similar interest in physical activity, and those types of things help as well. Again, joining a gym, walking group, hiking club, biking clubs. Sometimes just going out I know people who go out and just do like a little neighborhood walk where there might be a small group of neighbors that go out and walk. So any sort of that type of thing that can build up that social support for you is going to be beneficial. And then in return, supporting those around you that want to do that physical activity. So truly working both ways. you getting that support for you and the activities and the things you want to do, and then providing that back as well. Lack of energy. This is one too that, I mean, let's be honest, we all have days, weeks or days where this feels very real, where we're just tired. We've had a busy week, maybe we've had a long week, maybe we've had a ton of things going on that week, maybe we've slept poorly, whatever it is, we just feel like we don't have the energy. So this is something that is not infrequent either for a lot of people. So I always like to tell people, schedule it during a time where you think you're going to be the most active or where you're going to feel the most energetic. A lot of times for people, even if they're not morning people, once they get up and get out of bed, they realize that, okay, I'm pretty energetic in the morning. Now, again, that's not everybody. Sometimes people are more energetic even after they come home from work and their kids are there and they want to go to the park. And I got my kids with me. This is good. I feel very energetic at this point. So maybe it's over a lunch break. Find the time during the day that you feel like, hey, I'm going to have maybe feel the most energetic at this point. If it's possible to try to schedule that activity during that time, that's when I always tell people try to do that. Start slow and build longer times. Because honestly, guys, once you start doing this and you do it on a regular basis, you will notice an increase in your energy level. You're going to feel it. It's going to start to feel really, really good. And you're going to start to be able to build on that time. Okay. So the important thing is that you just start and you start slow and you build on that time. Really, really just the more you do it, the more energy you're going to feel and the better you're going to feel. Lack of motivation. This is kind of like lack of energy, but again, this is maybe like, hey, I feel like I slept well. My week's fine. I don't know. I just don't feel like doing it. It's a little different than having that lack of energy. So this is just like, somewhat of some ambivalence about it. Like it's just not a big deal. Like I just can't get myself moving. Maybe I should and I want to. I just can't get myself moving. So again, this is one thing that I tell people, you know what, put it on your calendar, schedule it during the week. I mean, if you need to write it in a planner, write it on a calendar, put it in your phone, put it in your calendar at work, whatever it is that you need to do. We are far more likely to follow through on it if we actually plan it out and put it in our calendar. And I can't stress that enough. Really plan ahead. That's what it really, really takes. Because sometimes once you plan ahead and you put it in your calendar, you will start to develop some good habits around this. I had a gentleman I was talking to just a couple weeks ago. It said he was doing this and now he's developed it to a point where now when he doesn't get it in for some reason, he feels like something's missing, right? He's gotten that motivation going. He's built on it. He's got a good habit built. And now it's the other way. Like if I don't get it in, now I need to figure out where am I going to put that? So that motivation grows. The more you do, the more you follow through on it, you start to feel really good about yourself. You start to feel that sense of accomplishment. You start to feel that confidence level grow. All of these things start to build up. So get it on your calendar. Take a friend with you, somebody that's going to help you feel more motivated, help you feel accountable, or make you more accountable, I should say. Put it on both your calendars. Those are the kinds of things that can just help you really get that ball rolling. And then hopefully it kind of builds from there. Okay, fear of injury. This is one too that just, especially as we get older, we tend to think about, gosh, if I start doing too much too fast, am I going to injure myself? These are legitimate things. So learning how to warm up and cool down properly, stretching, making sure that maybe if we're running or doing something high intensity, that we kind of cool down with something a little lower intensity. Stretching is a big one, you guys. Learning the best kinds of exercises for your age, your fitness level, skill level, health status, all of those things, making sure that we're choosing appropriate activities for all of those things. And feeling like you can do the activities that you can do safely. If you're not somebody who's been a rock climber, probably wouldn't suggest going out and trying to climb up the side of a rock or a mountain climbing or anything like that. I mean, choose activities that you can safely do that you feel are in your comfort zone. And there's lots of options. So you don't have to limit yourself necessarily on activities. You just have to find the right ones. And then just kind of like I said earlier, increase the amount that you're doing gradually. And again, your confidence and ability is going to grow. You're going to start to just feel really, really good. It's gonna happen. So start small and gradually increase. Okay. Lack of skill, kind of the same thing. Select activities that don't require you to learn a new skill. Start with walking, climbing stairs, jogging. These are things we all know how to do. We don't have to have a super high skill level to go ahead and do those things, but you're still going to reap a ton of benefits from doing those things. And then if you want to take a class to develop some new skills, let's say you want to learn how to play pickleball. Pickleball is incredibly popular right now. It's a great activity. It's fun. But you don't know how to play. There's lots of times there's places you can learn how to do that. You can join some groups to learn how to do that. So you can always expand on what you know and what your skill level is. But if that's not something that you're ready to do, start with something that you know how to do, and you're still going to get all kinds of really, really good benefits. So don't let any sort of lack of skill stop you, because again, there's lots of good things out there for you to do. High cost, or lack of facilities, equipment. Again, this isn't something that we need to necessarily worry about in terms of I can't afford a gym membership, or I don't have equipment at my house. I don't have weights. I don't have things that I can do. You don't have to do that. You can still find lots of stuff that's going to give you some really great, awesome benefits. Um, Again, starting with things that don't require any or very minimal equipment, walking, jogging, even jumping rope. If you can get a jump rope, jump roping is a great way to do that. Or, as we said before, just using body weight exercises like push-ups, sit-ups, squats, things that you can do without having any equipment at all. You can look for inexpensive or free, convenient resources available in your community, like parks, walking trails, worksite programs, things that are available to you at little to no cost that you can really maximize that benefit with, and not have to worry about the cost or going out and buying expensive things. So don't ever let that be a barrier for you, because you really can find a lot of really good options that don't require you to purchase those expensive things. So this one is always a fun one. This is a legitimate thing, guys. I know that living where we do, um, getting outside and getting activity during the winter months can be a challenge. And this is one too that I hear very, very commonly, where people will say, "Well, I'm not as active in the winter time, but during the summer months or spring, summer, fall, I do pretty good." Yeah, guess what? We need physical activity year round. Okay, so while this is a legitimate thing, sometimes the weather it's just dangerously cold outside with those bitter wind chills, or it's extremely icy, or we have just a ton of snow out there, and so getting outside does become a legitimate barrier. So you have to get creative. We have to develop other activities that we can do inside. Dancing, marching in place, indoor swimming, stair climbing, mall walking. Honestly, like I said, marching in place. I know sometimes it feels kind of weird just to stand and march in place, or walk in place. But again, it's better than nothing. And we have to keep moving. We can't just say, well, it's cold outside or it's icy outside, I'm not gonna do anything. Um, and so many times there's many of us that tend to back off on that because we can't be outside. So get creative. Or if it's safe enough to do, bundle up, go outside and have some fun, making sure that, yeah, you're safe when you do that. But understandably, that this part of the country, weather can be truly a legitimate barrier, but we have to figure out a way to work around that and work on our indoor activities. Okay. So be thinking about that, and just know that we have to maintain that level of physical activity all year long. All right. So what if I'm somebody that's just starting, again, regardless of how old I am? Maybe I'm a younger person that just hasn't been active, or maybe I'm an older person who has never been active or used to be, but I've fallen off and I'm just starting to get back into things. I always tell people, don't worry if you can't hit 150 minutes right out of the gate. If you're somebody who hasn't been real active, sometimes trying to shoot for that 150 minutes right out of the gate, that's not feasible. So just start small. If you've been sedentary for years, you can start today. That's the cool part about all of this. You can start today. It is never too late. So today is the day you can make healthy changes. Even if today is a day where you go out and you go 10 minutes, that's great. Start small. 10 minutes is great. Don't let this all or nothing thinking of, well, I can't do 150 minutes a week, so why bother? Don't let that all or nothing thought stop you. You can start today with doing something small. Okay. Simplest way to get moving, improve your health, start walking. Truly start walking. It's free, it's easy, you can do it anywhere, and you can go at a pace that works for you. If you can go vigorously, great. If you go at a slower pace, that's okay too. So that is one thing that is super cool. And right now, obviously, we're into the spring of the month as we currently are doing this, but spring of the year, I should say. But you can walk all year. So that's a good, simple, easy way to get going. Any amount of movement is better than none. Okay, that I can't overstate that enough. Any amount of movement is going to give us some benefit. Break it up into short bouts of activity during your day. 5 to 10 minutes here or there, 5 to 10 minutes here. It all adds up. Okay, guys, it all adds up. So the more you can do of that, the more benefits you're going to get. Okay. Again, as we said earlier in the presentation, if you have a chronic condition or disability, talk with your doctor. If you have concerns and you're not sure, what can I safely do? How much should I be able to do? Talk to your doctor and find out what's going to work for you. The important thing is to start. Again, and if it's not walking, start with something else that you enjoy. Like I said, it might be a neighborhood walk in the morning. It might be something that you find online that you can do after work, that you can do in your home. Again, getting others to join you, starting slowly, working your way up. There's lots of free apps and websites that have all kinds of activity suggestions, things that you can do. If you want to do something that makes it more fun, look online, look at apps. There's lots of things out there, guys, that you can look at to give you some variety, give you some ideas as how do I start. The important thing is to start. Okay. And the takeaway, here's why this is also important, as we kind of talked about at the outset. Science has linked being inactive and sitting too much with higher risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, colon and lung cancers, and early death. It's so clear that the benefits of being active help us live longer, healthier lives. There's just no question. And the cool thing about all of this is this is all within our control. By and large, we can make this decision for ourselves. We can decide how much of this we do it, when we do it, how we do it, what kind of activity that we do. That's the really cool part about all of this is we get to have some control over that and we get to decide. But the point is we got to start. We just got to start, and it's never too late. And a lot of times when we think about our kiddos, it's, get them started early and get that good habit of physical activity built when they're young. So the question I have for all of us is, what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Let's get moving, and let's really make this a priority in our life. We really need to. It's that important. So if you guys, as usual, if you have any questions about anything, you can reach me at that email on the screen there. Let me know if there's questions or anything that you need some follow-up on or whatever. I'm happy to do that. Shoot me an email and we can talk through that. So if there are anything, yeah, just let me know. And I hope that you all spend now this spring and summer, get moving, start small, or if you're somebody that's already real active, keep it going. Keep it going, because it's such an important habit that we can use for the duration of our life. Again, age is no matter, we can be active at any age. So happy moving. I hope you have a good spring and summer, and we'll talk to you next month.